Good afternoon. Oh, this is loud. Apologies. Good afternoon, Chair Baker and members of the commission.
Take your hand off.
Oh,
there you go.
sorry. This mic. Anyway,
There's another mic.
Yeah, use the other mic.
Use that one.
this one.
You gotta turn it on.
You might even want to sit down, Julia, so we're really looking
This one?
at you.
Yes.
I'm only going to speak for a moment. I just
Okay.
wanted to say a couple words about these wonderful folks here. So you all probably know that it's an enormous effort to do the wolf population monitoring in this state. Huge effort done by our tribal partners, community members, county personnel, district wildlife biologists, conflict specialists, but nobody is more central to that effort than these two right here, Trent Razine, Gabe Spence, our statewide wolf biologists, along with Ben Maletsky, who you know well. Those three, they hike, they ride on snowmobiles, they fly in helicopters and planes, all to get the population trends that we have for wolves over 14 years now. They get the knowledge about the pack demography and dynamics, distribution, everything that we know, or much of what we know about wolf recovery in this state is because of these guys. They have worked in the state for the better part of a decade. They both have done their graduate work here in Washington. I benefit from their knowledge and expertise every single day. I'm just incredibly grateful and lucky to have people like Trent and Gabe on the team. And together with Ben, we are your small wolf team for WDFW. So it's so wonderful that they get to be the ones to share with you what they've been up to all year and show you what's been happening with wolves in 2022. So with that, I'll hand it to Gabe.
Thanks. I might go back to this other mic.
You can use either, but I think on this presentation, especially, there will be outside interest. So we have to be sure that we are actually registering with the mic.
Okay. Is that going to work?
No.
Little closer.
Closer.
Bring it up and speak directly into it. I think that. Yeah,
I'll use this one.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm Gabe Spence. I'm one of the statewide wolf biologists, and I'm here to talk to you today about, or give you a briefing on our 2022 annual wolf report. Next slide. So I'll start with a little background. To some of you, this will be old hat and pretty familiar. Wolves were basically exterminated from the state in the 1930s or sometime thereabouts, and functionally really didn't exist in the state of Washington until about 2008, when the first documented breeding pair was discovered. In 2011, our wolf management plan was approved, which set up recovery objectives and also 3 recovery areas, which you see on the map there. The North Cascades, Eastern Washington, and the South Cascades and Northwest Coast. The listing status of wolves has been somewhat complicated, and I won't go through the whole entire history, but recently they were listed as federally endangered in the entire state. And then they were, they were listed or delisted in the entire state and then relisted in February in the western part of their range. So the 2 western recovery zones that you see up there. So currently in the Eastern Washington recovery zones, they're not federally listed, but in the western 2 parts they are. We have both state and tribal management in this, which we manage wolves through, and the information in this briefing was gathered with help from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community, and the Yakima Nation. Okay, definitions. So we'll talk about this a lot as we go through. So a pack is 2 or more wolves traveling together in winter, generally maintaining a territory. And then a successful breeding pair, slightly different, as an adult male and female wolf with at least 2 pups surviving to December 31st in a given year. And so these are the delisting objectives outlined in the plan. They're based on successful breeding pairs. And there's basically 2 paths to delisting. Both have, one requires 15 successful breeding pairs for 3 years, and those have to be spread out through the 3 recovery zones. The other has 18 successful breeding pairs for 1 year, also spread out through the 3 recovery zones. So each of those has a numeric component, a temporal component, and a spatial component. So capture and monitoring, as Julia said, this is the heart of at least what I do, and it generates a lot of the information that I'm presenting to you right now. This year, we had a great year for captures. We captured 29 wolves from 20 different packs. At some point in the year, we were monitoring 53 wolves from 27 of the packs, and we're currently monitoring 37 colored wolves, so 70% of known wolves in Washington. For our survey method, we use what's called a minimum count, which is basically it's the minimum known number of wolves that we have in the state. And then we have a 12.5% figure that we add to that for dispersers and lone wolves that are very difficult to count. And that's very standard. It's been done by state agencies all across the Northern Rockies and us. Next slide. So for this year, let's see. So this year, our minimum count was 216 wolves. We had 26 successful breeding pairs and 37 packs. So that's a 5% increase over last year for our numbers. We also have the first confirmed pack in the South Cascades called Big Muddy. So that's a big deal in terms of wolf recovery, since the South Cascades has been missing any packs or breeding pairs since we've started. So that's pretty exciting. We also had 5 new packs in the Cascades as a whole. So that's also really good, since that's kind of frontier of where recovery is happening at this point. Okay, so this graph shows trend in minimum number of wolves. It's pretty straightforward. Time on the bottom, number on the side. You can just see the trend there overall. So the black lines obviously indicate numbers. The 2 white bars there are from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville. They collected data differently than we did for 2 years, but now they've moved back to the same method. So we just moved them back into the same color. 23% overall population growth. You can see it's not a straight line. We have areas where the population is growing more quickly and then areas where it's grown more slowly. Trend in minimum number of packs. So this graph again, year on the bottom, number on the side. The white bars are packs on the Federated Tribe, or no, the white packs are the North Cascades, gray bar, Eastern Washington, black bar, South Cascades, and Northwest Coast. So you can just see the numbers there. Let's see. Yeah, most of the growth was in the North and South Cascades. So yeah, you can see that clearly from the graph. I think we had the same number of packs in the Eastern Recovery Zone. And this is kind of what we expected. The Northeast and, well, the Blues are also part of the Eastern Recovery Zone, which get forgotten about a lot, I think, but those areas are pretty full. And so we haven't expected a lot of new packs there. And that's kind of what we see here. And we see the growth in the Cascades, which is kind of what we thought. So here's a map of the packs. So I'm just explain this to you quickly. So the green circles are packs where we didn't have a collar to create a pack territory polygon. So those just represent where the packs generally are. The irregularly shaped polygons are packs where we did have a collar and we could create that home range or territory. And then circles or shapes with hash marks are single wolf territories. So those didn't go into our pack counts, but we know there are wolves there that are staying in that spot. And so we wanted to put those on the map so that people knew what's going on. So 4 new packs in the North Cascades, 1 new pack in the South Cascades. We had 2 new packs form in the Eastern Recovery Zone and 1 new pack on the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Beaver Creek, Teanaway, Diabshead, and Sprague Lake are all single wolves, which you can see. So those aren't in our pack counts. And then 4 packs lost pack status last year. That was Teanaway, Beaver Creek, Skookum, and Nason, which was on the CTR or CTCR. We also know that there are wolves on the north end of Lake Stehekin, or near Stehekin, and the north end of Lake Chelan. We detected them during the summertime, but not during our winter survey period. So they're not on our map. And that's a place where we're working to figure out what's going on there. So breeding pairs, which is our metric for recovery. So this is another simple graph, year on the bottom again, number on the side. Black is Eastern Washington, and then gray is the North Cascades. So you can see, let's see. Yeah, so we had 26 total, 70% of our packs were breeding pairs, successful breeding pairs, which fits right in with what we've seen in literature and other places. See, so we had 5 breeding pairs in the Eastern recovery zones. So that's the 9th year in a row that that zone has met its recovery objectives. We have 2 new breeding pairs in the North Cascades. So that's the 3rd year it's met its recovery zones, and then still none. We do have a pack in the South Cascades, but no breeding pair yet. Sure, yeah. So the new pack right now just consists of 2 wolves. We know it's a male and a female. They've been together since most of last winter. So yeah, they've been maintaining that territory. So seems likely that they would have pups this year, but obviously they're wild. We don't know for sure, but yeah. Let's see. Okay, and this is just a map of the breeding pairs, so you can see it. So the dark green are packs where we documented successful breeding pairs. So 20 in the Eastern Washington region, which is the Northeast and the Blue Mountains, and then 6 in the North Cascades, and still 0 in the South Cascades, but maybe next year. And thanks, I'm going to turn it over to Trent.
Thanks, Gabe. So I'm going to take over the second half of the presentation, and we can both answer questions at the end or during, whenever. So in 2022, we had 37 documented wolf mortalities, and we've laid those out here. That represented about 17% of our 2022 count. It is worth noting that all of those documented mortalities occurred in the Eastern recovery area, which equates to roughly 25% of mortality within that recovery area. So it's a fairly high number, but that might explain some of the plateauing we've seen in that Eastern recovery area. Of those mortalities, 29 of those were caused by humans in one way or another, and those are laid out here. 11 of those were legal tribal harvest, almost exclusively on tribal lands. 6 were wolves that we removed in response to chronic livestock depredations. Livestock producers removed 3 wolves while protecting livestock under the Caught in the Act allowance in the wolf plan. We had 9 wolves that we've classified as unlawful take or under investigation. And then we documented 7 natural mortalities from a variety of sources, a couple of cougar-caused mortalities, a moose-caused mortality, and a couple of wolves dying of old age. Go ahead. In addition to mortalities, we do track wolf dispersal. That's the mechanism by which our population grows and recolonizes. And you can see here by this very cluttered and complicated map that we had a lot of dispersal last year. We documented 12 dispersals. 10 of those dispersals were on wolves wearing active GPS collars. And then 2 of those dispersal events were wolves that were captured at some point previously in a different pack, and we ended up catching them in the winter and knowing who they were. That one kind of dotted white line was a wolf caught by the Spokane tribe way back in 2016. And then we caught him this winter in a Navarre pack. Interesting on the dispersal front, our average dispersal distance in the state is just over about 80 miles, kind of straight line distance from where they start to where they typically end up. But we've had wolves just last year go over 160 miles, kind of into BC. And we've had wolves just hop one pack territory over and disperse maybe 20, 25 miles. Go ahead. Here's dispersal, just kind of a little more zoomed in. And I use this slide to kind of illustrate that wolves can be anywhere in the state. If you look at that North Cascades recovery area, all those different color lines are wolves cruising around throughout the whole recovery area, well outside of known pack territories. And we like to use this to illustrate that, when people see wolves, even if it's outside of a known wolf territory, there's a distinct possibility that it is a wolf. We're not going to dismiss it. And a lot of times it's these dispersal animals walking around. In addition to that, So in addition to that map, I wanted to illustrate that there's not a ton of barriers to dispersal. I think a lot of people like to think about, what might be limiting our wolf population expansion and possible barriers to that. But when we look at these dispersal maps, it becomes pretty clear that not much gets in their way. We had a wolf cross I-90 and start that Big Muddy pack. We had a wolf swim the Columbia at least 3 times to get from the Teanaway pack to northeastern Washington. And we had this wolf, and I just put this picture in here. We had a wolf leave the Shady Pass pack and start the Napiqua pack by crossing right over the middle of the Glacier Peak Wilderness. And she actually crossed these glaciated peaks over the top of a glacier in the middle of summer, gained over 3,000 feet in elevation and lost 3,000 feet in elevation in a couple hours to get over that mountain range. So nothing really stands in their way as far as I'm concerned. Wolves are some of the most adaptable species on the planet, and they can kind of get around anything if they want to. Now we'll move into wolf livestock interactions. So this graph here, in addition to the stuff that Gabe was talking about, including our minimum number, minimum packs, and our breeding pairs, it also shows the percentage of depredating packs this year. And this year we documented 7 packs involved in livestock depredation, which is about 19% of our population. But noteworthy, only 3 packs were involved in more than one livestock depredation, which is about 8% of our packs. And that 19% number, while that is consistent with other states, we do have a pretty low number of chronic depredating packs compared to other jurisdictions. Go ahead. So this just shows the number of wolf-caused livestock mortality this year. So we did document 17 mortalities, 15 cows and 2 sheep is being killed by wolves. But in addition to that, we had 9 cows that we confirmed as injured by wolves. And these are similar or lower numbers to what we saw in the years 2018, 2019, and 2020, when we had far fewer wolves. And it's actually slightly higher than we saw last year. This graph shows when that conflict tends to occur. And as you can see, the conflict tends to start in the spring and peak by mid to late summer and then taper off. This is consistent typically with the livestock grazing season. And for a long time, we thought this had a lot to do with cows being out on public grazing allotments and open range. But this year, it's worth noting that 23 of the 26 depredation events that we documented occurred on private lands, which is almost 90% of the depredations were on private lands this year, and only a couple were on public lands. So it's not exclusively occurring on public lands. And it is worth noting that we haven't documented a ton of calving operation depredations to this point. And I think that's due in large part to the work by our conflict specialists.
Trent, can I ask a question about that? The private lands, they're forest company owned lands by and large, but are they, what's the terrain like? And are they forest or what's the condition?
Yeah, so these years, I wouldn't even say they're forest company owned lands. These are like what you would consider private grazing pastures owned or leased by livestock producers. A couple of those depredations did occur on timber company lands, and those are large industrial timber lands that are typically leased by those livestock producers with agreements with their timber companies. But I'd say the vast majority of those depredations that occurred on private lands were actually in a pasture type setting.
And when you say pasture, if we looked at that, we'd say, yeah, that looks like a pasture. Just trying to get a feel.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think so. Yeah, some of these pastures are classic valley bottom type pastures, fenced all around. Some are slightly higher elevation, but they're still open terrain, stringers of trees kind of throughout them, but they're what most folks would consider your classic pasture sort of scenario.
Okay. One more follow-up to that. Yeah. Does that mean that are there just as many public lands grazing operations, but we've been working with them more closely? Deterrent measures?
That's a great question. We hope that's the case. There are just as many public lands grazers. There's as many cows on the landscape as there has been historically. And so we would like to think that the reduction in depredations is due to our work and the work of the NGOs that we collaborate with to reduce that depredations. Yeah, I think it's a testament to the work that we're doing.
Thank you.
So here's kind of a breakdown of what WDFW spent this year. The overarching number, we spent about $1.6 million in wolf management. About 57,000 of that was spent in damage prevention cooperative agreements with 26 different livestock producers. And that includes things like fencing, range riding for those producers, or funds for those producers to range ride their own livestock, carcass sanitation, stuff like that. In addition to that, we spent another $230,000 on 16 state contracted range riders. In addition to the range riders that we contracted with, we worked with 2 NGOs who spent an additional $430,000-ish on contracted range rider activities, primarily in the northeastern portion of the state. We also spent money compensating livestock producers for indirect and direct losses that occurred in 2021. These numbers, while we paid them in 2022, they're from 2021 losses. And that includes 1 indirect claim for roughly $7,000, and then the rest were 3 direct claims totaling about $8,000. And then we spent roughly $120,000 on lethal removal operations. We had to remove wolves from 3 different packs this year to mitigate recurrent livestock depredations. And then the last big bin is wolf management research activities, and that includes funds for staff time, whether it's wolf biologists or some of the conflict time, equipment, helicopter time, that sort of stuff. All of the other stuff that's not captured in the other bins. You can go ahead. And then finally, this is, oh yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me. Could you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
I'm just looking at these numbers and seeing that there's a very low number there associated with livestock losses, only $14,000. And obviously I'm taking out the wolf management piece, but the lethal removal operations are 120,000. Range riders are 231,000. You said plus there is money coming from other organizations for the range riders, and the damage prevention agreements. Now, obviously the range riders and the damage prevention agreements and, those things minimize the livestock losses. I understand that, but somehow the numbers just don't, proportionally, we're spending $120,000 on lethal removal, but the livestock losses are only 14,000. It seems like, we could have 2 conclusions from this. Either we're doing such a great job that there aren't those livestock losses, and that's why we're spending all that money. The other question is, would we spend less money if we had more livestock losses, but we paid more. We paid compensation to the producers, but overall we're spending less money and the producers are still getting compensated. Has that ever been looked at?
Yeah, that has been discussed. With those numbers, I do want to point out that they're 2021 numbers, and in 2021 we had 5 documented wolf-caused mortalities, and we paid out on 3 of those. And then so the producer and the other 2 chose not to take compensation for those losses, which is very common, particularly in the northeast portion of the state. Some producers use our direct livestock compensation program, and some producers choose not to.
You said 2021, but the slide says 2022.
So those are 2022 expenditures, but the $14,000 was actually, we spent that money in 2022, but
I got
due
you.
to depredations that occurred in 2021.
Yeah, got it.
Go ahead, Julia.
So I think Trent did a great job answering that question. I just want to make it crystal clear that that doesn't represent the economic loss of the losses.
Right.
That represents what we paid out based
Okay.
on what claims were submitted to the agency. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but I'm wondering why
People don't submit claims?
people
That
don't
is a
submit
very
claims.
big, long, complicated topic that I would be happy, and all of us would be happy to talk about later. But there is
Okay.
so much history and a lot behind why folks choose not to submit claims. And I would encourage you to speak with Commissioner Linville about that as well.
Commissioner Linville is urging, Commissioner Linville would like to speak.
Yeah, I don't want to have that be left out into the ethers. So one, from my perspective as a cattle producer, one of the reasons, there are multiple reasons that we should discuss. The information that you as a producer are required to give to the government to get the money is uncomfortable for some producers to give. It's fairly, from some folks' point of view, it's quite invasive. And so that is, that's why some producers feel resistance. It's also because, as you can tell, they're getting compensated in 2022 for 2021 depredations. That's obviously not very streamlined, and the process needs probably some work. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so let's keep going.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll just wrap this up with, this is just a list of some of the ongoing research projects that we had occurring in Washington in 2022. And some of the highlights are, I think you're all aware that we wrapped up the Predator Prey project. All the field work is done. A handful of papers have already trickled out and been published, and there's more in the pipeline. You're going to see more papers coming out from all of the grad students involved on that over the next few months and kind of into the future. I don't know how long papers are going to be coming out of that project, but it'll be a while. There's going to be a lot of research. In addition to that, in association with the periodic status review, we had a postdoctoral researcher, Lizanne Petraka, do some wolf population viability analysis and population modeling for us. And that was extremely helpful. And then we had a handful of other projects looking at habitat connectivity, wolf livestock mitigation, and the efficacy of some techniques, and then the impact of wolf recolonization on various things, such as other small carnivores, ungulates, you name it. And this is just a clip of some of the research going on in the state. And that's all I have. Questions?
Does anybody have questions or comments?
That was very thorough, Trent. That's probably why we don't have a lot of questions. Good presentation. Or maybe it's because it's the end of the day.
It's always good to be last.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Anderson. And then
This is a question for Commissioner Linville. Can you elaborate a little bit more? I'm curious about are the people required to produce? What kind of information is that is so intrusive? Because that doesn't seem to. I don't know why that's necessary.
So I'll answer, but it sounds like we need to have a conversation about this that we can. It's like bank account information and, you know, your personal finances. And also for the non-direct losses, the proof that you have, you sort of have to have really good documentation of what your, you know, open rates were, meaning how many cows come up annually not pregnant on your place. And a lot of producers don't have those numbers in place before they have depredations, and so it becomes difficult to choose. But I don't want to take up time, but definitely I'll be happy to, because there's even many more layers than that.
Commissioner Anderson.
Excuse me. On one of the maps, you showed individual wolves. I don't recall seeing that in previous years. Have there been individual spottings like that just were kind of buried in the numbers, so to speak? Or
so we started including the individual wolf in a territory actually when we confirmed the diopsid wolf right here in Skagit County a handful of years ago. We put a collar on that wolf. It was utilizing a territory. We tracked it for a while, but we never documented another wolf with it. So we knew we needed to do something. This wasn't our classic disperser. So we put it on the maps starting in that year. I think it might have been 2017-ish. And ever since then, we've had a handful more of those crop up each year. So we have put it in prior reports, but I don't know how far back that goes.
so they're kind of like hermits. I mean, do they?
Until they find a mate.
They don't want to be around anybody.
Yeah, the Skagit wolf seems to be more on the hermit side, but we're hoping some of these other wolves, they're waiting for other wolves to disperse into those territories, is what we think is going on.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Reagan.
When you showed the territories for the latest year, how much do they vary from year to year? And I'm trying to anticipate what they may look like in 2-3 years. Are they going to look fairly similar up in the Northeast, or are we going to see changes there? Significant changes.
There's some nuance there. So that's in general, the number of packs that you see in the Northeast, I would expect to stay fairly similar. But the territories, they'll kind of jostle among each other. So those packs, let's say the Onion Creek, Lead Point, and Smackout packs, they're kind of currently jostling for territory as we speak. And next year, I wouldn't be surprised if those polygons look slightly different than they do now. But they'll generally be roughly the same size. They might just be distributed slightly differently on the landscape. But I don't think we'll get more packs kind of packing into that area. But we will get more packs. As you can see, there's a lot of unoccupied territory in the Cascades. And so that's where we expect most of our pack growth to occur.
Yeah. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Technical ditty. The Maverick pack, is that like in Chumstick area, Leavenworth, or where? It looks like it's, or is that in the Antioch?
Yes, is the short answer. It's near the Chumstick. Yeah, and kind of north of there. So I guess just east and north of Leavenworth.
Okay. And the Nanum pack, did that go away last year? Is that why it's not shown?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
So the slide where you showed number of packs with collars, I'm seeing a lot of packs that don't have polygons. Presumably that's because we don't have collared wolves in those packs. It looked like a higher number of, and maybe not, but it looked like there was quite a high number of packs without polygons, therefore without collars, right?
Yeah, can you go to one of just the map of that shows all the green shapes on it?
You were there, Nick.
Just go forward. There,
Yeah, that
that's
one.
good.
So,
Sorry, Commissioner Smith, could you repeat the question?
so you showed a chart that showed the percentage, I thought, of packs with collars. And then you showed this map that shows the polygons where we have collared wolves, and it didn't look like those two were syncing up. It's not a big deal, but just confirming that the round circles, we know there's a pack there, but we don't have collars on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And oh yeah, I would add, yeah, I think if you looked at it closely, they would line up.
Okay. It was just my visual.
Yeah, no. I would add too that generally those circles are the new packs, right? Those are packs that we just confirmed the winner, and therefore we haven't even had a chance to get in there and put collars in those yet.
Okay.
Commissioner Linville.
I want to know what killed the wolf on your first mortality page.
That was a cougar.
That
was,
right
yeah.
Head, right?
Yep. That was a cougar killed wolf in the Dominion Pack territory up in northeastern Washington. And it's interesting, you know, the Northern Rocky Mountain ecosystem, they didn't document a whole lot of cougar caused mortality from wolves. We're seeing a lot more here than they did, it's pretty unique. And actually 2 weeks later, I investigated another cougar caused mortality in the smack out pack. So it's happening. Yeah.
I'm tempted to make a joke about that. I'm not going to.
Don't make it.
Can you speculate a little bit as to why that might be? Why more cougar kills?
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot in the wolf team, and I'll let Gabe go after I try. We don't really seem to know why. There's a few things that could be at play, but I think one of them has to do with the differences in landscapes. So a lot of the data in the Northern Rockies comes out of the Yellowstone ecosystem, and it's much more open. It's much more gentle terrain. It tends to favor the way wolves hunt, and cougars are restricted to smaller areas in those ecosystems, whereas Washington's a little bit steeper, a little more rugged and more timbered, which I think tends to favor the mountain lion's hunting strategy. So I think that plays a large role in it, but Gabe might have another opinion.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I have a quick, go ahead, Commissioner Lynn, cool.
I wonder if you could show the depredation slide again, livestock slides again.
This one, or
yeah. I'm just curious what the trend is there. I mean, are we being successful, or are we having more problems or less? You could probably pick it apart faster than I could look at it, but tell us.
I think when I look at this graph, the trend that I see is consistency. You know, once our wolf population kind of got up off the ground post 2011 or so, the number of packs depredating has remained relatively constant throughout the years, even as our wolf population has grown. In some years it's been a bit lower, some years it's been higher, but generally, 14 to just under 20% of packs are depredating in any given year. And that's, as I said, that's pretty consistent with what other jurisdictions have seen across the West.
Yeah, but we have more packs now. So
it's
the second to the last column is the known mortalities is 37. So it's an increase from last year. So that just means more depredations. I mean, the percentage of the packs that are depredating is good. It's remained constant, but the total number of mortalities from livestock is increasing every year.
Yeah, so, and this.
Well, it says 37 there.
Yeah, so this
versus 30, huh? Oh, that's wolf mortalities. Okay, I'm looking. I want to know. It seems like we're being successful in terms of the wolves, but I want to know what's going to bite us. What's going to bite us?
Yeah.
What our problems are going to be in the future? When the next meeting we go to in Eastern Washington, and we get lots of comments on livestock mortality or problems. So I guess that's sort of like, if we're done with the 2022 report, I'd like to hear sort of what this year is, what you're working on this year, other than the kind of the standard work you've been doing, you know, the monitoring and such. But
is it okay if I ask my question first, because I actually have a question about this year?
yeah, sure. Didn't want to lose out.
We've got a conference going on here. You guys okay?
Oh, go. I'll let Commissioner Baker go, and then I'll respond.
When we were in Colville, a couple of things happened. One of them was that three of us did go out with a prominent rancher, and I had, I believe, misconceptions, much like Commissioner Smith was suggesting, but I was amazed at how sort of civil and civilized these places were. Very barns, fences, the whole bit. And so that was illuminating. So we had quite a few grumpy ranchers in the room. And but aside from the grumpiness, the one thing that I think that maybe they all agreed with was they wanted us to somehow mandate more collars. They want more data, and they want more wolves collared. And so I wondered if that is the department's position as well, and if it is, what's stopping getting more collars out there?
Yeah, I think the department, by and large, we do everything we can to ensure we have active and functional GPS collars in every pack that could become in conflict with livestock. Some of the packs we purposefully choose not to collar, particularly if there's no or very little livestock conflict. So you'll look on the Idaho border, a lot of that area doesn't have grazing allotments. We've stopped collaring those packs. But any pack that poses a risk of livestock conflict, we try to get in there. We try to put one and ideally two collars into that pack. Any more than that, we found, doesn't get us anything additional than the two collars do. We don't get any additional data that we're not getting from those two collars, as far as high use areas, where the rendezvous sites are, and all that kind of stuff. We seem to be able to capture with two collars. And so our goal is to have two collars in those packs when we can.
I've got a comment about that.
Okay, go ahead.
So we had a presentation, Julia knows, I think you guys know, on a blue sheet that I had submitted largely about range riding, and we had range rider representatives come, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name from Kapow.
Scott Nielsen.
Yes, Scott Nielsen, thank you. So Scott was asked the question directly, would more collars benefit you? And he gave the reply, which surprised me. Not really. We don't really find that collar data all that useful from, on a day-to-day basis. So, you had got that information from one producer, but the actual range rider, head of that organization was saying he didn't think it was on a day-to-day basis for the range riders necessarily all that useful. So the collar data is certainly important for us, but I'm not sure how important it is for the producers or range riders.
Yeah, it's worth noting that like the collar data is always old.
Right.
None of those GPS points are ever gonna be in the future. They're always going to be 1 to 12 to 24 hours older than when they were made. So we find the best use of those collars is to identify high use areas where the pack tends to congregate, and help livestock producers avoid those areas, put more resources monitoring their cows in those areas of high use, which, as I said earlier, is we can capture that with the two collars per pack. And sometimes having two collars per pack or trying to maintain two collars per pack can mean that we might have smaller periods of 3 collars in a pack or something like that, knowing a collar is going to die. But it is a goal to have 2, particularly in those livestock packs.
All right, well then to finish off this segment, Julia wants to say something.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, I completely agree with what Trent said. I just wanted to say we're representing the department's view on this. I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of cattle producers of Washington or Scott. They were in the room to make sure they could speak on their own behalf.
Right.
I don't want to misrepresent anything that they said or their views and opinions. And we meet and talk about it a lot and everything, but just, you know, these are department views and there can be other.
Right. No, I was the one that was paraphrasing what he said. I wasn't asking you to do that.
Can I just respond, go back to?
Yeah, we're going to go back to Commissioner Limpole's question to close out this segment.
Yeah. So this table is confusing. That is wolf mortality, not livestock mortality. And I made the same mistake the other day. We actually had 17 confirmed losses this year of wolf killed livestock. And as I said earlier, that is comparable to what we saw between 2018 and 2021 or 2020, when we had far fewer wolves. So you could argue that depredations, the number of cows or sheep killed has gone down on a per wolf basis. But with that said, I think it's really important for us all to remember that when these livestock losses occur, they tend to really hit one producer particularly hard. They're not spread widely across the state. It's not a burden that's shared among everybody. Typically, when these things occur, one producer's, they're taking the bulk of those, and that can hit these small, well, it can hit any producer particularly hard, no matter how big or small you are. And so that is why we're so responsive to it, because we know even if it's, you know, on a statewide scale, 17 animals might not seem like a lot of losses. But if you think about it, if it's your herd and you're absorbing the losses of 10 to 12 to 15 of those, that can be huge. And so that's why we try to be so responsive to that.
Right. Yeah. In a way, I guess it's a good thing because it concentrates your problem in one place. And so it's easier to deal with. You don't have 17 different people to deal with and work with. But I guess the question is then how do those livestock producers that are most impacted, how do they feel about the process of compensation and working with you guys? And I mean, because I hate getting yelled at meetings, you know, so
yeah,
I know, but ideally, you know, we would work to a solution that we don't get yelled at as much. We might get yelled at still, but so I guess that's the question is, yeah, it seems like from that standpoint, it's a success. It certainly seems like the wolves are doing well. If the numbers of depredating packs remains constant, that's a good thing. But I'm looking at like customer satisfaction, you know, and our customers are the livestock producers, I guess, the public in a way. I think the customers that are interested in the wolves, the welfare of the wolves and the recovery of the wolves should be very happy with this report. I'm wondering if the other people are very happy.
Yeah, and I won't try to speak for livestock producers.
Yeah,
I think
no.
Commissioner Linville has a perspective, and I think the livestock producers you talked to in Northeastern Washington shared their perspectives. Right, any producer who's being impacted by wolves is not going to be happy, no matter how good of a system that we have in place, right? Like nobody likes that, and we're fully aware of that, and we do everything we can, and we have a lot of areas where we can improve. We can streamline the compensation process, and we're always working to try to do that. We can streamline any number of things, and we're always working on that, but it's incremental progress that we're working toward. But yeah, I strongly encourage you to reach out to those producers, because I won't try to speak for them.
Right.
Commissioner Parker.
You have a graph here that will, I think, answer the questions of my colleague. It's the graph that shows the trend in wolf depredations over time to present. If you throw that up.
This one right here.
Yeah. And you contrast that with the increase in growth of the wolf population. To me, that is a successful program. I mean, there are people in the state that want wolves to thrive, and there are people in the state who are bearing the consequences of that directive or that priority. And what I see here is about as good a response as the department could show, it seems to me. At least in my experience, I wouldn't hesitate comparing those two graphs, putting those two graphs side by side, I wouldn't hesitate to declare victory and go home. And for again, sometimes the easiest part of a fish and wildlife resource solution is getting the money. And for 1.7 million bucks, I call this a bargain. I call this a pretty darn good solution. So, and I guess I would argue that with anybody. So that's sort of my way of saying congratulations. I think this is just an outstanding report, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Just since we're on this graph, you know, the ideal thing would, you look at the trend there and it goes up in 2019, it peaks there and then it starts to go down. The ideal thing would be if it kept going down, right? So why did it go up so high? I mean, that doesn't look good to me. Why did it go up? Is it going to continue to go up? So yes, Julia. Grant?
Yeah, it will. I mean, nowhere where there's wolves that overlap with livestock is there no conflict. It's part of having wolves on the landscape, and there's always going to be conflict with wolves. We can work to mitigate it as best we can, and as Commissioner Parker said, we like to think we're doing a good job, even though we can improve. And I think this variability you're seeing has a lot to do with the fact that there's, you know, only in any given one of those years, there might only be 1 or 2 or 3 packs involved in livestock depredation. So it's kind of just a function of having small numbers that kind of make that fluctuate like that.
Could you make a graph like this on indirect losses too? This is the direct losses, right? So that's the other issue that comes up is indirect losses, loss of productivity of the herds, opportunity loss for the ranchers. We went out with the Wishons and they said, yeah, we hear that the wolves are approaching our pastures. And so we drop everything and we put our horses in the trailer and we take off and we go up there and we do our range riding. That's time lost for them doing whatever they were doing before. So I'm just curious about that. If you guys have something like that, that would be another slide to put in there.
So we don't have a graph on indirect losses. I think that's primarily just due to the fact that that option is not utilized a ton. In any given year, it might be 1 or 2 livestock producers using the indirect loss avenue for some of the reasons that Commissioner Linville was talking about.
Right.
And it would be even more subject to wide variation than our depredation graph, but we could potentially do something like that.
I think you're getting at something really important here. And so, you know, just because you have an increasing wolf population does not mean you will have increased losses. And I think the graph that Commissioner Parker is referencing that we showed at the blue sheet presentation shows your increasing wolf population, and it shows your livestock depredations generally steady and your wolf removals generally steady despite an increasing wolf population. But you're hitting on a really important thing. We can document known depredations, we can document wolf removals, and we can look at those metrics that are a little bit easier. What's more difficult is what you're talking about is indirect losses, and what's the time and effort that folks are investing into this? What are the resources that the state and other partners are investing in this? We can track that as far as what that means in terms of how much money we put in, how much money our partners put in terms of time and effort that livestock producers put in. How do you measure that? It's very, very difficult. And the process to get compensated for it is difficult. That needs work. And definitely if there were a place where I would direct some commission energy, it might be to those compensation WACs and think through how can we make that process a little bit easier. But we don't have a simple way to show you a picture of all the energy that those folks are putting into making the conflict less. And that's one of those things that we need to say here. It's not, of course, just WDFW staff, it's the owners themselves who are doing this work and who are implementing these tools and who are making the numbers good, who are making it a success. Do you want to?
Thank you. Maybe just a segue to ending your day. I know you may have more questions, but I thought I would just, if I could, do a quick wrap. It's a great day, and I want to thank all of you. You spent a lot of time on topics that we deal with in the wildlife program today, starting with the lands acquisition piece, and then you heard a lot about Skagit elk and wildlife conflict, and you're hearing a lot about wolf management, and that includes the conflict component. So I just wanted to remind everyone about the agency's investment in this area. This is incredibly important. Wildlife conflict work and its interface with the public is not going to go away. It's going to continue to grow, and we need to be properly resourced. And you've heard me talk a little bit about our vision for creating a new landowner services division. And that landowner services division is going to be focused, as the name says, on services that we provide landowners. So the wildlife conflict side, as well as our private lands engagement, from wildlife conservation that occurs on private lands and the access component that we provide. It's been slowing coming. We've had the position announced for some time. And so just the quick update is that we're still trudging away at that, trying to get applicants. We actually have a growing pool of applicants now. And I'm really, really hoping that we're going to be able to bring that division fully online here, in the near future. And I think it's a signal to our commitment to this really incredible work, not just wolf management, but the component of the private lands and the conflict side. And we'll have a division doing that work, focused attention on all of this. And despite not having that and having this work kind of pushed out into other divisions, the team has done incredible work. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work. They've really been leaning into the wolf stuff lately, and great conversations with the commission. But I just wanted to say thank you and kind of plug that we are really investing with this work and thinking that it's a big part of our future. So thank you.
Well, that was a beautiful wrap up, Erica, but Commissioner Smith has a comment.
Well, I just want to say thank you to the team too, and let them know, especially, Gabe, Trent, and Ben, when they're up in the helicopters, we're always worried about you guys. It's dangerous work that you're doing on behalf of the department. And, we do appreciate it. And it's obviously, it's paying dividends, but, I would hesitate to to push hard for we need 3 collars per pack, because I know what the cost is. I don't mean the cost of money. I mean, it's a dangerous business. So thank you guys. I think that was a great report. And, I've been watching this issue very closely from the day the first wolves were documented in Washington. And I agree with Julia. I think Washington is way out ahead. We can always do more, always do better, but we are really way out ahead in our approach to wolf recovery. And I'm proud of that effort.
Thank you. Thank you for presentation. And did you have final words?
No, thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that wraps up the last agenda item for today.